So let's begin with our usual weekly motivation meditation. Relax your body, which I have to do here. Relax your mind. And as it said, place your mindfulness on the breathing in front, as we'll see when we study mind and mental factors. Mindfulness is a mental factor that holds in mind something that is already realized. So you have to first watch the breathing, then you just keep it in mind with memory to the exclusion of everything else. Then, as always, having calmed a little the discursive mind with watching the respiration, bring your attention to your mental consciousness. And try to recognize, or remember, if you've done before, the nature of this mind as being clear light, conventional clear light nature. whatever thoughts arise, when they arise, recognize them as having emerged from the clear light nature. Take your attention away from them and instead place it on that nature from which they arose. This is our conventional potential to become a Buddha. All the states that we long for religiously, spiritually, can emerge from this mind. There's nothing that we can't do. There's no fault that can't be eliminated. None of our past activities or our current ways of thinking indelibly stain the mind. And our ability to recognize this now is due to our having this fortunate circumstance of a life of leisure and endowment as a human being. Most people spend such opportunities from a spiritual point of view as complete waste the opportunity, just trying to find some stability or happiness this life. Wealth, power, friends, pleasure of the senses. But we have met the Dharma, have heard about it, have some aspiration to develop spiritual qualities, and have at least a belief, many of us, in the existence of future lives, past lives, and that the numberless lives ahead of us are more important than the current circumstances. So we try to make use of this life to develop spiritual realizations, to achieve, if possible, the highest goal of enlightenment or liberation, but at least to be working on the fundamentals of the path that will predispose us in future lives to enter into a deeper study and practice of the Dharma, Bodhisattva's practices. In order to progress in a deeper way, especially about subjects such as emptiness, we need to know the workings of the mind, and we need to understand logic and so forth. So for that purpose, I'm going to participate this morning with a sense of responsibility toward all living beings who've been our mother, not just once, but infinite times in the past, have been depthlessly kind, who are exactly the same, equal with us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. So knowing how we wish ourselves to be happy, trying to find that motivation to bring about the happiness of all living beings based on our essential equality with them. Try to set a motivation for the class this morning. I'm going to participate in order to eventually achieve enlightenment, from which state I can effortlessly and spontaneously affect the spiritual progress of all living beings, bring them into that very same state in the most perfect way. Without questions of political ideology or partisanship and conceptions like that, knowing exactly how to lead sentient beings. I'm going to participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then, how are you doing? Anyone have any burning questions? Amanda, was that you? Were you? No, you were just, oh, sure, Christine. There we go.
Good morning, Venerable George. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning.
I have two questions. Are prime cognizers and valid cognizers the same? Is that a synonymous term?
Yes, unless you're dealing with some kind of terminology that's not usual. Usually the Sanskrit word pramana is translated either as prime cognizer or valid cognizer. It has other meanings also, like for instance, when we talked about, we say the Buddha is pramana, that means the Buddha is a valid teacher, a valid being. So in that word, that Sanskrit word pramana, mana generally is explained as meaning mind, is one of the synonyms of mind. Mind, not mine. And from the point of view of those who say that a prime cognizer or a valid cognizer is that which is new, a fresh cognition, that they take the pra to mean fresh, whereas the Prasangika takes the pra of pramana to mean main, principle. So that which the mind which realizes its principal object. So those two terms can be synonymous. I think in the text, the translation that we have of our text, Betsy Knapper's text, the FPMT changed prime cognizer to valid cognizer. There was some comment early on in the text that every incident of a prime cognizer was changed for FPMT standardization to valid cognizer. Okay, does that help?
Yes, thank you. And one other question.
Okay.
What's the difference between being an apprehender and having the aspect of being an apprehender?
So an apprehender, you could say that all consciousnesses that know something, they're apprehending something, right? They're knowing something. So in the definition of a self-knower or autocognition, again, there's different ways you can translate it. Usually here we say self-knowing, that which bears the aspect of an apprehender. So what that means is this. Our ordinary consciousnesses that are not self-knowers, what aspect do they bear? What aspect do they have? They have the aspect of something that is being apprehended. They are other knowers. They apprehend something other than themselves. So they said to be they have the aspect of an apprehended, an object that is being apprehended. Whereas a self-knower looking inward it doesn't look at other things. All it knows is the apprehending of the consciousness within which it is one nature.
Right.
The I consciousness, so I consciousness is an other knower. It bears the aspect of an apprehended, but within that I consciousness, as the same nature of it, according to Sautrantika, is a faculty that knows that you're knowing. It bears the aspect of an apprehender.
Oh,
Apprehender meaning the consciousness, the I consciousness that is apprehending.
so it's not an apprehender, but it has the aspect of an apprehender because it's not another knower.
It is an apprehender. All consciousnesses, you could say, are apprehenders.
Okay.
They apprehend something.
Okay.
What are they apprehending? Either they're apprehending something other than themselves, or they're apprehending the nature of the
Okay.
of the knowing. You know.
Okay. So they're both okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Amanda, you have your hand up, and then Karen.
Yes, my question is, in the meditation, did you say that thought arises from the clear light mind?
Yes. Thoughts are conceptions and so forth. Everything that's within our mind emerges out of that clear light nature.
Oh. Thanks. That's
that,
interesting.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Like in
Thank you.
Tantra, also in Tantra, when we talk about even more subtle minds, the ultimate clear light nature, sort of the emptiness of the mind, you can say that everything arises out of that. So the Buddha's nascent state, natural state, is one in which the mind is just perceiving the non-inherent existence of all phenomena, the emptiness of all phenomena. And out of that, all phenomena arise out of that emptiness. They arise in the sense that they are still empty of inherent existence, but if in terms of tantric practice, if you have that kind of perception, they are peering out of, emerging from that clear light nature, but still have that non-inherent nature. They appear, but one has a recognition that they are not inherently existent.
Thank you.
Karen, did you have a question? I thought you had raised your hand before, but maybe not.
I do.
Okay.
Venerable George, thank you. Going back to the previous question about the I consciousness as an apprehender, I read something that said your senses, including your I consciousness, not just apprehends the object, knows form and color, but then actually will know that object without a mental consciousness knowing that object. Does that make sense? Is that correct?
Well,
Like if I see David, my eye would recognize David without an interpretation.
I think the recognition is still mental, but it will come a little bit later today about familiar objects. Say a child recognizing their mommy, in the text being patriarchal Tibetan, this is the son recognizing the father, the shape and so forth. So I think it's probably well known that a child, before they've learned terms, even before they say mommy, daddy, and things like that, their eyes will open when they see the familiar form of the mother, also the father, and maybe some smile will come, or sense of familiarity. So it's a little bit. It's not as though the I knows mom or dad. The I consciousness knows shapes and colors, but those that are familiar, I think it's said that one can recognize a familiar object that way. How that happens without the interaction of mental consciousness, I'm not sure, if indeed that is exactly right. Now, let me leave it at that for the time being, because that's something I'll check on. Bob, you have a...
Thank you.
Yeah,
just going back to the first question that Christine asked, I wonder about a clarification of the language, because when I read that definition of a self-knower, that which has the aspect of an apprehender, when I first read that, I took that, I'm really asking about the word has, because when I first read it, my natural way of reading it was to read it as saying has the nature of, and that doesn't make sense. But I think I'm wondering if the word has is more to be taken in the sense of possesses. In other words, it has as its object the apprehender aspect, meaning that part of the consciousness which is apprehending. So if I wonder if that word has really could be better translated as possesses as an object.
you're saying has. I'm hearing
H-A-S. Yeah.
Okay. That which has.
Yeah, and maybe from the Tibetan, it's clearer.
You could translate it as that which bears the aspect of an apprehender. So you could say that which possesses the aspect of an apprehender.
So does it mean that it holds? When you say holds, does that mean it has its object is really the aspect of the apprehender, the object of that consciousness?
The word hold is not in that sentence. That which bears the aspect of an apprehender. So consciousnesses have aspects. That which, say the eye consciousness, the aspect is of shape and color, and the aspect sound consciousness or sounds. Go on.
So it's a technical term, aspect, as as objects are casting their aspects toward us.
Yes.
That's the meaning of aspect. Okay.
So there are other meanings of aspect in other contexts. Usually the Tibetan word is nampa, that which bears, nampa chen, that which bears the aspect of an apprehender. So the whole, of course, the Prasangika doesn't accept the existence of self-knowers. So this is an exercise in understanding some of the philosophical, historical background, and also comes up in various circumstances. So there's said that every consciousness, other than self-knowers themselves, have a quality of knowing themselves. It's not as though it's a separate thing. It's not like it's a separate entity or like in a little part of the mind that's watching it. The whole mind has that capacity to know that it is knowing. So that capacity, the self-knower, what is the aspect that it is bearing, that is impinging upon it? The aspect is the aspect of knowing. Say the eye consciousness is knowing another object, so it is knowing. The self-knower within that is knowing the eye consciousness, is bearing that aspect. Okay, worthwhile to go over. So anything else? That's a question. So we are, I think, unless my page has gotten mixed up here, we're in the divisions of, we just finished the divisions of yogic direct perceivers on page 16 of the root text. Valid cognizers that are yogic direct perceivers and subsequent cognizers that are yogic direct perceivers. We've gone over that in the quotations about that. Just to recall, yogic direct perceivers are mental consciousnesses, but of a particular variety that have arisen in dependence upon a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight, not just one or the other, both, and that know certain subtle phenomena, such as subtle impermanence, even gross impermanence, and selflessness of persons. So they are never inattentive. They always know their object. There's never a moment when they've lost concentration. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a yogic direct perceiver. So that's more or less what we talked about before. Now, direct valid cognizers. The definition of a direct valid cognizer is a new, incontrovertible knower that is free from conceptuality. Okay, so what is that talking about? We're talking about valid cognizers now, not just direct perceivers alone, but direct perceivers that are valid cognizers. Are there any direct perceivers that are not valid cognizers? Well, yeah, the subsequent moments are not valid. Are there any direct perceptions that don't realize their object? Because it says incontrovertible knower that is free from conceptuality. So that excludes most of our mental consciousnesses, other than the
wrong consciousness, right?
Yeah. So what would that be?
Like, jaundiced eye seeing a yellow snow mountain.
Right. Or if out of anger, you get so angry that you start to see red, because of the influence of the anger. So generally, valid direct perceivers know their object. There are exceptions. So here, the definition covers all the points. Incontrovertible means that it excludes wrong consciousnesses. Free from conceptuality indicates that it is not knowing its object by means of a mental image, right? Conceptuality. When direct valid cognizers are divided, there are 4: self-knowers, self-direct valid cognizers, sense direct valid cognizers, mental direct valid cognizers, and yogic direct valid cognizers. What do you think? Yogic direct valid cognizers, all yogic, yogic direct perceivers, are they not all valid? That was one of the questions that came up before. Shankar, what do you think?
Subsequent cognizer, right?
Right. The only exception is in the case of the Buddha. The Buddha's yogic direct perceiver always is valid. It knows its object. That was kind of the exception that was mentioned at the end of the paragraph that we had just finished last time. It always knows its object by its own power, whereas for ordinary beings, the first instant is granted some special, status according to Sautrantika and the other schools, in that it is gotten. It's like the engine of the train. It is by its own power. It is known the object as incontrovertible toward the object, and the subsequent moments are sort of pulled by that. Karen.
Can a yogic direct perceiver, a yogic direct perceiver still have an awareness to which an object is ascertained but not realized? So like if a Buddha's driving a car and doesn't notice the trees going by, does that happen? Or
so that I don't think anyone would be driving a car while in yogic direct perception. So you have a yogic direct perception of subtle impermanence or of selflessness of persons. You're in meditative equipoise. So that state of mind is never inattentive. That was one of the characteristics that we'd mentioned before. So
But it's not inattentive. Oh, just to clarify, so it's not
go on.
But if a fly lands on that meditator's head,
right?
How does that fit into that explanation?
Okay. So as the senses are withdrawn at the time of yogic direct perception, your eye consciousness might be inattentive. It is inattentive because it may still be there, but even if there's some eye consciousness, it's inattentive. All of your mind is concentrated, all your mental consciousness is concentrated on the object of the yogic direct perception. So the mental consciousness is not distracted by any of the senses. They are not giving input to the mental consciousness. So it's not as though there is something appearing to the mental consciousness that it is not paying attention to. The only thing that is appearing to the mental consciousness then is the subtle selflessness or the subtle impermanence or gross or subtle selflessness of persons, according to Satrantika. Upper schools would say also emptiness of phenomena, the yogic direct perceiver realizes. So it's not as though that yogic direct perceiver, like say for an eye consciousness, you can talk about an inattentive eye consciousness if your mental consciousness is paying attention to your ear, what's coming to your ear, what's appearing to the ear, and what's appearing to your eye, you're not paying enough attention to remember it. But here, the situation is different because there's nothing else appearing to the mental consciousness now in yogic direct perception.
And to summarize, that meditator would not be able to recall that the fly landed on their head.
I think so, unless the fly bit and left. You can surmise later that you were bitten by a mosquito or tsetse fly or marmot. So that will come up later when we talk about memory in Shantideva's Bodhisattvacharya Vatara. You know how the bear who is hibernating knows that his head has been bitten by the marmot. Okay. So self-knowing. So we talk about direct valid cognizers. So of the division, the 4 divisions here, self-knowing direct valid cognizers. I'm not sure why Purvachok decides to start with self-knowers here. Among these, the definition of the first, self-knowing direct valid cognizer. A new incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality. So that has the characteristics of the new incontrovertible knower that is free from conceptuality. That's the general definition of a valid cognizer. Now added, that is directed only inward and is just an apprehender. Maybe you don't need both. You can just say, in fact, you could just say, which bears the aspect of an apprehender, which Bob was wondering about before. Here it says 2 things. It says directed only inward. That's the main thing. That means it's not directed at outer objects other than the consciousness, and is just an apprehender. Why do you think it adds that thing as just an apprehender? Anyone had thought about that? Christine's thinking. Is that your thinking, Mudra? So is there another consciousness that knows the self-knower? Christine?
Well, and that's what I think is this what you're getting at? This is what the Prasangikas have a problem with, and that is it never ends because the self-knowing has to have another self-knower to know that self-knower to that. So it's like ad infinitum.
Well, yeah, they would say it. So Trijang would say there's not a problem. Prasangikas
Right.
would say there's a problem. That to verify that.
Right.
So yeah, here maybe that's added for that reason. Just an apprehender. It's not an apprehended. It's not apprehended by some other consciousness. A new incontrovertible knower, free from conceptuality, general, direct, valid cognizer, that is directed only inward and is just an apprehender. Different colleges have different ways of emphasizing things. They might say, instead of saying that is directed only inward and just an apprehender, for some people it would be enough to say that bears the aspect of an apprehender. That would be enough. Bob?
Yeah, to me, it's a little bit funny that they changed the definition, because as far as I can tell, the only difference between a direct valid cognizer and a direct perceiver is this word new. So I was surprised that they just didn't leave all of the previous definitions exactly the same and just add the word new.
Well, what definition are you talking about without the word new?
Well, I'm talking about, for example,
did we have a definition that said an incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality?
Sorry, no, what I'm talking about is yeah. So if you have a direct perceiver, so a direct perceiver is non-mistaken, right?
Direct perceiver is non-mistaken. It doesn't have the additional word incontrovertible in it, just for direct perceiver, just for a direct perceiver.
Okay.
Incontrovertible. That's maybe why you were wondering. So let's go on. You hone your question as we go on. The definition of the second, a sense direct valid cognizer, new incontrovertible knower, free from conceptuality. So that means when we say incontrovertible, that means it realizes its object. Incontrovertible means that it realizes its objects. It has gotten rid of all there are no misconceptions about it or misapprehensions about it. New, so that it according to the
okay. Well, let me ask you then. Then this is actually very interesting, because as far as I was concerned, that a direct valid cognizer was just a direct perceiver that added the word new to it. But you're saying that that you're saying that there's a difference between non-mistaken and incontrovertible.
Yes, and we've mentioned it several times in different contexts. So the word, when we talk about mistaken here, and of course you could even change the words around. They're not inherent in any of these things. Mistaken generally means mistaken with respect to the appearing object.
Yeah.
Incontrovertible means it can't be controverted by any other conception, by any other perception. That means it has realized its object. Non-mistaken means it's not mistaken with respect to its appearing object. So there's slightly different. Well,
yeah, but here the appearing object. I mean, for a direct perceiver, the appearing object is the same as the actual object. So when you're saying it's not mistaken with respect to its appearing object, that's identical with being not mistaken with respect to its apprehended object, because the appearing and apprehended object are the same object.
Yeah, but you can have direct perceivers that are still that are not incontrovertible. When we talked about a direct, do you have the definition of a direct perceiver there?
Yeah, the direct perceiver is defined on page 13, top of page 13. A knower that is free from conceptuality and non-mistaken.
Right.
So would that be like, yeah.
Non-mistaken there does not mean the same as incontrovertible.
Okay.
Incontrovertible means it is realized, the object. It can't be incontrovertible. It can't be controverted. Is that a word? It can't be refuted by some other consciousness that is a better understanding of it.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's a good distinction.
Yeah, so it's important that we recognize here, because in some cases you'll say both non-mistaken and incontrovertible. Their meanings slightly different things. Like, say, for instance, conceptual minds are mistaken in that they mistake the appearing object, the mental image, for the object that is being conceived of. You imagine your mother's face, there's a mental image of your mother's face, and you can still, that mind can still be incontrovertible. It can actually, let's say, realize your mother's face, remember your mother's face. An inferential cognizer that realizes emptiness, conceptual mind, it is mistaken because what is appearing to it is the mental image of, say, whatever it is that you have inferred. That is not the actual object, but it can still be incontrovertible. It can realize that. Say that mind can realize subtle impermanence, even though what is appearing to it is the mental image of subtle impermanence. So that mind is mistaken, but is incontrovertible. So that
I mean, for me, I'm always confused when they use the word mistaken with a direct perception, because for me, conceptual consciousnesses, mistaken has a real meaning, because you're really looking at a different object. You're looking at this appearing object rather than the actual object.
But say there are mistaken visual consciousnesses. So not all visual consciousness is not a direct perceiver. Direct perceivers have to be unmistaken. So if you see a white snow mountain as blue or yellow, that is a mistaken consciousness. That's not a direct perceiver.
Yes, but if it is unmistaken, how can it be different? It can never be wrong if it's unmistaken, because the appearing and the direct object and the engaged object are the same.
You get the distinction here. I consciousness, let's go through various degrees here. I consciousness, I direct perceiver, and valid direct, valid direct perceiver, I consciousness. They're different degrees of subtlety. An I consciousness doesn't necessarily have to be unmistaken. If it is unmistaken, then it is a direct cognizer. It is a direct I consciousness, right? Direct perceiver. If it is unmistaken. Say mistaken can mean, and we'll talk hopefully today about other mistakes in I consciousness. If you see what's it called? A sparkler on the 4th of July, someone twirling it around, it looks like a circle. That's said to be a mistaken I consciousness, because there's not an actual circle there. Or if you're in a boat or on a train and it looks like the things are moving and you're standing still, that is said to be a mistaken I consciousness. So not all I consciousnesses are unmistaken. Those that are unmistaken are direct perceivers. Those that get at their object and realize their object in addition to that are valid. So probably most of your, those that get at their object are realizing consciousnesses. They have realized them. They're incontrovertible. Among those that are fresh, the first instant of those are valid. The subsequent ones are subsequent cognizers. Maybe most of our I consciousnesses are direct valid cognizers in that they get at their object, but it is not a necessity that all I direct perceivers are incontrovertible.
So if you have a subsequent moment, then there isn't really a term for that. All you could say, because that's more, if you're having a subsequent moment of a direct valid cognizer, then you are realizing your object by virtue of the first moment.
If you're having a subsequent moment of a direct valid cognizer, it's not possible because subsequent moment here is no longer valid.
Yeah,
so
but then what do you call it?
You call it a subsequent cognizer.
Okay, period. But, okay.
Subsequent cognizer is something that is realizing something which was previously realized. So it has been realized means it's incontrovertible.
Okay.
So definition of a sense direct valid cognizer: new, incontrovertible knower, free from conceptuality, that arises in dependence upon a physical sense power that is its uncommon empowering condition. Remember, we talked about empowering condition before. So this means it's uncommon. That means it's not a sense faculty or empowering condition that other consciousnesses can utilize. The ear consciousness, the ear faculty, or the ear physical sense power does not allow I consciousness to enter it and to see things. It doesn't allow body consciousness to enter into it and feel things and so forth, or nose consciousness. You can't smell with your ear and so forth. When sense direct valid cognizers are divided, there are 5. So the 5 senses, right? Eye, ear, nose, taste, and tactile. Mental direct perceivers. So we said self-knowing, sense direct valid cognizers. Now mental direct valid cognizers. The definition of a mental direct valid cognizer is new, incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality. That's shared with all of them. That arises in dependence on a mental sense power that is its uncommon empowering condition. So the mental direct cognizers, direct mental perceivers, they don't depend on an organ like the other senses do, a faculty that is a material. Even though it's subtle material, the eye faculty, the ear faculty, even though they're subtler than ordinary material, they're not consciousness themselves. They are subtle kind of material. Whereas the mental direct perceiver, its empowering condition, its uncommon empowering condition, or uncommon faculty, is just a previous moment of clear and knowing consciousness. Can arise, the empowering condition for a mental direct perceiver can also be a previous moment of I consciousness. It doesn't have to be a previous moment of mental consciousness. It just has to be clear and knowing. When mental direct cognition, sorry, go on.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry.
Could you repeat the last sentence? You said the mental consciousness can have an empowering condition as an empowering condition the previous moment of an eye conscious. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes. Generally, when we have,
Okay.
say there's two times when the mental consciousness accesses the eye consciousness. Let's say the first moment you have an eye consciousness, there is a one instant of mental direct perception of that. The last instant of the train of eye consciousness also can give rise to the first moment of a mental apprehension of that when you're thinking about the color or the shape or whatever. So there, the eye consciousness itself was the empowering condition for the next moment of thinking about the color or shape. Oh, that's nice, or that's pretty, or that's blue, or whatever. That conceptual, then you're beginning to have mental conception there. Let's see.
But wait, I'm sorry. Again, actually, I'm not sorry.
Okay.
So how does that relate to this phrase, the sentence here that says arises in dependence upon a mental sense power that is its uncommon. So if the eye consciousness, the previous instant of the eye consciousness is the empowering condition, then how is it in dependence upon a mental sense power?
So here, when we talk about faculty or sense power, they're synonymous. They're just different ways of translating the same Tibetan, right? Or the same Sanskrit. Like in Sanskrit, Indriya, like Indra is a powerful king, right? Indriya means, can mean faculty or empower, empowering, and so forth. What is the uncommon empowering condition of a mental consciousness? It's a previous moment of consciousness. Here it says, it just independence upon a mental sense power, a mental faculty that is its uncommon empowering condition. What is that mental sense power? It's a previous moment of, it can be any moment of consciousness. It can be a previous moment of eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, or previous moment of mental consciousness. If you have a continuum of a mental direct, what are we talking about here? Mental direct valid cognizer. Say you have clairvoyance of another person's mind. The second moment of that clairvoyance is based on the first moment of the clairvoyance as its empowering condition. So that is a mental consciousness. It's continuity of that is acting. Whereas it can be that the empowering condition of a mental consciousness is a previous moment of eye consciousness, or taste consciousness, or tactile consciousness. You're thinking, then you're having a successive moment of mental direct perception of that.
So then for a sense consciousness, its uncommon empowering condition can only be its own sense power.
Yes, it can only be a physical sense power, not its own uncommon, but in general, those sense consciousnesses have, as there's John McMahon just appeared suddenly out of the ether there, talking about emerging from the clear light nature of the mind. So sense consciousnesses, only their empowering condition has to be, that which acts as the interface has to be something that has matter, subtle matter in the organs. Whereas a mental consciousness does not have to have an organ. So some people might think it's the brain, right? Physical thing. The mental consciousness arises without the need of that. Let's go on a little bit further.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Yogic direct valid cognizers. Okay. So again, you could say this, you could say that as in the previous ones, it is a new incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality. that arises in dependence upon its uncommon empowering condition, which is a meditative concentration that is a union of calm abiding and special insight. Which is sort of the word order here is different. Here it says an other knowing exalted knower. So the reasons for saying other knowing here is some kind of, you can check some of the other texts that explain, I think Kyabje Rinpoche mentions in here. You might not have to say other knowing. This is to exclude the possibility of saying a self-knowing direct perceiver, or a valid direct perceiver would fall into that category. You might not have to say that. Is an other knowing, in other words, it's not a self-knower, exalted knower, which implies it is incontrovertible, in the continuum of a superior, that independence upon a meditative concentration that is a union of calm abiding and special insight, which is its uncommon empowering condition, newly and directly realizes here is sufficient to say that, realizes either subtle impermanence or the coarse or subtle selflessness of persons. So it is realizing its object directly and newly, based on its exclusive empowering condition, which is a union of penetrative insight and calm abiding. Bob.
I mean, when I compare again the definitions of yogic direct valid cognizer with yogic direct perceiver, I mean, one real difference that I see is that in this new definition, it for the yogic direct valid cognizer, it seems to limit the objects that it can see to either subtle impermanence or coarse or subtle selflessness of persons. Is it possible for the other case, for that of just the yogic direct perceiver, to realize other objects? Or do yogic direct perceivers, are those yogic direct perceivers also only limited to these three objects, the same way that the valid yogic?
I think they're also only limited to that. The yogic direct perceivers necessarily realize their objects. They are not inattentive. They're a special kind of mental consciousness that is based upon that union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight.
Yeah, but you just said something just there. You said yogic direct perceivers realize their object, but I thought for the direct perceiver it was only unmistaken, and that being unmistaken was not identical to realize.
Right. Can you you point out a yogic excuse me.
So in other words, a yogic direct perceiver.
I was asking your patience to take that water. So can you point out a yogic direct perceiver that doesn't realize its object?
Well, I mean, that's what the difference is between unmistaken and incontrovertible, right?
Right.
So perhaps a yogic direct perceiver would perceive the subtle impermanence of something, but maybe it would not, it would correctly see the subtle impermanence, but maybe that it would not realize it in the sense of having incontrovertible knowledge about it.
Let's go back to the definition of the yogic direct perceiver. That which is generated in dependence on its own empowering condition, a meditative concentration that is union of calm abiding and special insight, and is an other knowing, exalted knower in the continuum of a superior that is free from conceptuality and not mistaken. And in the comments here, it says, there is no awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. That is a yogic direct perceiver, because it necessarily ascertains, a yogic direct perceiver necessarily ascertains its object of apprehension. That means ascertains means that it can lead to a remembering consciousness of that. Although,
so my question is really more simply, what is the difference between these two? What is the difference between a yogic direct perceiver and a yogic valid cognizer? Direct.
My understanding, what's the word? Depending upon further analysis, is that yogic direct perceivers do realize their objects, and so they are valid direct cognizers. I may be wrong about that. I'll do some more research. That's my understanding.
Okay.
So
in this case, they are the same.
Just if you can posit, if you can think of a yogic direct perceiver that doesn't realize its object, then there would have to be two categories. Okay, let's leave it at that. So yogic direct valid cognizers. We've gone through the definition. When they are divided, there are three: realizing subtle impermanence, realizing gross selflessness of persons, and realizing subtle selflessness of persons. Okay. Now, we've talked about direct valid cognizers. We talked about direct perceivers and then added the stipulation that they be valid and so forth, so that they realize they're incontrovertible. Now we're going to talk about something else. Maybe seems like it comes out of left field all of a sudden. Facsimiles of a direct perceiver. Or the word that's being translated as facsimile is tarnang. Tar means like, nang means appearing. Appearing like. It appears to be a direct perceiver, but it's not, in other words. Facsimile. You know what a facsimile is? What is a facsimile? It's almost like a copy of something. It looks like the original, if you take a Xerox of something, a Xerox of a tanka, it looks like the tanka, but it's actually a facsimile of it, right? A photo of it. So facsimiles of direct perceivers. Two parts, definitions and divisions. Definition. The definition of a facsimile of direct perceiver is a knower that is mistaken with regard to its appearing object. Okay. So what is mistaken? Generally, a direct perceiver is unmistaken with respect to its appearing object, right? Remember, direct perceivers, they're unmistaken with respect to their appearing object. A facsimile of a direct perceiver is something that is mistaken with respect to its appearing object. Well, if you talk about sense consciousness, the one we were talking about before of seeing a snow mountain, a white snow mountain, as though it were blue or yellow, blue because of lack of oxygen, yellow because of jaundice or something like that, those would be they would not be direct perceivers because they're mistaken with respect to their appearing object. Also, seeing a sparkler, a firebrand, as a circle, that would be mistaken with respect to its appearing object. If you talk about if you talk about direct perceivers, sense direct perceivers. So facsimile of direct perceivers and mistaken consciousnesses are synonymous. So if something is a mistaken consciousness, it is not a direct perceiver. You could put it in the category of appearing to be, a facsimile of a direct perceiver. So there are 6 conceptual mental facsimiles of direct perceiver and 1 non-conceptual facsimile of a direct perceiver. Well, even the 7th one here has lots of different examples. That's the one we talked about right now. Non-conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers. An eye consciousness that sees a sparkler and so forth, or the boat that the trees are moving while you're in a boat or on a train or something like that. The 6 conceptual facsimiles are more sort of interesting. They're called mistaken conceptions, conventional conceptions. I think one of the texts translated as conceptions that are conventional truths, but here we say conventional conceptions, inferential conceptions, conceptions arisen from inference, remembering conceptions or memory conceptions, and wishing conceptions. What is this talking about? So illustration. The illustration of a mistaken, well, so first of all, this list comes from, I think, Dharmakirti and Dignaga and so forth. You know, you might think this is just something that Purbachok has written about. So an example or an illustration of a mistaken conception. A thought apprehending sound as permanent. We can have many mistaken conceptions, right? A thought apprehending sound as permanent. Why is that called a mistaken conception? When we're using the word before mistaken to mean mistaken with respect to its appearing object, right? From that point of view, all conceptions are mistaken. But here, mistaken conception means a thought an example of that is a thought apprehending sound to be permanent. Is sound permanent? No. Can someone think that sound is permanent? Well, you can think anything, right? Another example would be a thought apprehending a self of persons, as though there was an inherently existent or substantially existent self of persons. That would also, maybe that's what we more commonly think of. Conventional conception. What's meant by conventional conception here? Is an example or illustration of that is an inferential cognizer that realizes sound to be impermanent. Okay. Inferential cognizer. I think, yeah, we're as yet to give the definition of an inferential cognizer, but you may remember from tenets or sort of intuitively, an inferential cognizer means a state of mind that has been arisen from a correct reasoning. A correct reason, like sound is impermanent because it's a product. You've meditated on this. You've ascertained that sound is a product, that whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent. It's called the property of the subject and the forward pervasion. And you have had an aha moment when everything comes together, and you have proved to yourself, you have a realizing consciousness, the first instant of which is a valid consciousness that realizes sound is impermanent. It's mistaken in the sense that it is mistaken with respect to its appearing object. So that is said to be a facsimile of direct perceiver, because you might, to your mind, it seems totally clear at that time that sound is impermanent. It is not a direct perceiver, however. It is categorized here as a facsimile of a direct perceiver. Yeah, Bob.
Again, just because, I mean, the language sometimes to me feels like a real problem, because to me it sounds like the difference between the first and the second category is that has to do whether your conception is what they talk about as factually concordant or factually discordant. I mean, to me, it sounds like category 1 would be identical with what you would call a wrong conception. And
Right.
category 2 would be what would be something like you might call a conventional truth.
Yeah, well, the second one, some texts translated as conceptions that are conventional truths. So the second one. So mistaken conception here is based on, that terminology is based on terminology that Dignaga and Dharmakirti used. You could say that it is wrong conceptions. Good observation, okay. So third one, inferential conceptions. What is that? An illustration of that is a thought that is a mind apprehending a sign. So what does that mean? Takzengi lo, or takzengi topa. A thought that is a mind apprehending a sign. What is a mind apprehending a sign? So when we talk about inferential cognizers, and we're going to talk about, hopefully we'll talk about that today. Your mind is, you're mentally thinking, right? You're thinking about a reasoning. Sound, let's say, for example, sound is impermanent because it's a product, or all phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they are dependent arisings. What's called a logical reason. You're trying to determine that, let's say, sound is impermanent by the sign product. We talked about this before. So in a syllogism like this, a logical argument like this, you have a subject, not the same as when we talk about subjects and objects, but the subject of the syllogism, sound. The predicate, that which you're trying to prove, is impermanent. There's some predicates that are being predicates, some that are existing predicates. That is to say, sound is impermanent. That is an is predicate. There can be some that say exist. Say for instance, on a smoky mountain at night. Smoke exists because fire is not observed, or something like that. Generally, the predicate is what you're trying to prove. The subject and the predicate, form what's called the thesis, or maybe that's better to say that what you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove that sound is impermanent. The third element is the sign or mark. In this case, product. Sound is impermanent because it is a product. So those are the three elements. You have to have, for a correct reason, you have to have what's called the property of the subject. That means that the subject sound has to be a product. You have to ascertain that beforehand. You have to establish that. A consciousness that is when you're meditating or you're thinking about this, doesn't have to be in deep meditative equipoise. A consciousness that is knowing that sound is a product, that has ascertained that, has determined that. That's called, that's one example of a mind apprehending a sign. Another example is that all products are necessarily impermanent. That's what's called the forward pervasion in the syllogism. Christine, you're sitting there like you're taking all this in. You know all of this. You don't have to take any notes, right? No, okay. No need. You can look later. So those things that precede the actual inferential cognizer, when you've ascertained that sound is a product, or that all products are impermanent, those are called mind's apprehending a sign. And that will come immediately afterwards when we talk about inferential cognizers. The fourth, a conception arisen from inference is a thought that arises after an inferential cognizer. So it's not the inferential cognizer itself. How about the second moment of an inferential cognizer? Well, you may not know this yet. Shanka's dealing with some heavy, are you there? So
Yes,
how about the second moment of an inferential cognizer? Is that still an inferential cognizer?
if I remember correctly, I don't think so, but I don't remember why.
It's not an inferential cognizer because only the first moment is an inferential cognizer. It's freshly and newly knowing that. The subsequent moments arise by the power of the first moment. Only the first moment arises in dependence on a reason, that sign. So only that's the inferential cognizer. So a conception arisen from inference could be a second moment of that, or other thoughts that arise after that. The fifth here, we taught memory conception. When we talk about facsimiles of direct perceiver, memory conceptions. Example, illustration, a thought.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
No, I touched my watch. Siri was thinking I'd said something there. I didn't get that. Can you repeat? It said, a memory conception illustration, a thought that today remembers an object of the past. So I can remember Geshe Sopa's teaching. I can remember meeting the Dalai Lama, having my picture taken, all of these kind of things. These are memory conceptions. They might seem very clear to you in your mind, but they are not direct perceivers, obviously. Okay? Sixth, wishing conception, a thought that today wishes for an object of the future. So sometimes when we talk about, when we did our meditation at the beginning, at certain points I mentioned, there are different kinds of thoughts you can have. You can have thoughts of the past, memory conceptions, the previous one. You can have future-oriented thought, thinking about something in the future. Oh, I'm going to get my new car. I'm going to, meet a new friend. I'm going to the theater or something, thinking of the future. Also, that might appear to your mind very clearly, but that is not a direct perception. Here categorized as a facsimile of direct perception. Okay? We okay? Christine?
It seems like this is where my mind lives most of the time. Is that accurate?
I don't know.
Well,
future-oriented conception.
No. I mean, all of these.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Actually, well,
I live.
Whether we have inferential cognizers or not yet in our mind, we probably inferred some things correctly. But the other ones generally, are mental activity.
Okay, thank you.
Non-conceptual mental facsimiles of direct perception. So this is now, when we talked about the conceptual, now the non-conceptual facsimile. So it's not a direct perceiver. That means it's mistaken with respect to its appearing object. So there are those that are mental consciousnesses and those that are sense consciousnesses, because you can have both mental direct perceivers and sense direct perceivers, right? So an illustration of the first was explained above. So while I'm just going to go off camera for a moment because I have to take a pee-pee break, but I have something here, so it doesn't take me long because I'm taking this medication and everything. And I will ask you, what is, when it says an illustration of the first was explained above, who can say what that was? What's an illustration of a mental direct perceiver that is mistaken?
Okay. So does anybody want to take a stab at that? So if you have
It says it was explained before. So what was that explanation?
Yeah. So if you have a mental consciousness that is a facsimile, then the definition is you have to have a mental consciousness that is a knower that is mistaken with respect to its appearing object. Does that ring a bell for anybody? Stephen?
What came into my mind was about the question I asked last week about dreaming consciousnesses, which are mental direct perceivers, but they're mistaken according to their appearing object, since the dream is not factually concordant. But maybe that applies to memory as well.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing. I think more what they were thinking of is that. Shanka, did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say the illustration is the first one before this, right? Mistaken conception, a thought apprehending sound as permanent.
Yeah. Well,
no, but that's conception.
Oh, that's
talking about mental direct perceiver that is mistaken. So Stephen's example, I think, is the correct one. There may be some other mental direct perceivers that are mistaken, but mental direct perceivers generally, there is something that is an existent that is clearly appearing. So this is a facsimile of a direct perceiver. So it is the mental consciousness when you're dreaming at night, when you have clear dreams, not the ones at the beginning or the end when you're kind of thinking, maybe you're thinking as you're falling asleep and you start to get into a dream state. At that point, it's not necessarily a clear appearance. It's still a conceptual mind. Here, when we talk about dream state, it's when that whole thing is happening so clearly. You believe the dog is chasing you, or that you've won the lottery or something like that, or you forgot the questions on the exam and the fear arises, or some kind of excitement arises. That kind of clear appearance is mistaken. Even though it clearly appears to the mental consciousness, it does not exist in the way that it appears, in the sense that it is real, actually concordant.
But why does it say that the illustrations that it talks about, it says, an illustration of the first was explained above,
yes,
which seems to be referring to all of the conceptual consciousness.
Oh, yeah, you have to be agile here. So you have to look back over the text. When did it talk about mistaken mental consciousnesses? So you can find earlier on in the text when it talked about dream consciousness. Actual dream consciousness is a mental direct perceiver.
So Venerable. So any oh,
wait, let me just say. So it's not mental direct perceiver. It is a mental consciousness, because it's not called a mental direct perceiver, because a mental direct perceiver is non-mistaken with respect to its objects, right? So it says it's a facsimile of a direct perceiver. So dream consciousness is not a mental direct perceiver. It appears to be a direct perceiver, but it is mistaken with respect to its object. So it is not an actual mental direct perceiver.
Is it a conceptual perceiver? Is
No,
it a conceptual?
it is a mental perception to which an object clearly appears. That means a mental perceiver. Okay, it's not a conceptual state of mind where you have a mental image of the dog chasing you or something like that. Think about it for a while. Where are we now? Non-conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers. So the first one is mental consciousness, and it says illustration of the first was explained above. And then there are non-conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers that are sense consciousnesses. Okay, sense consciousness, which is non-conceptual facsimile of direct perception. This is what we talked about when I gave examples from right from the beginning. With regard to this, there are facsimiles of direct perceivers that are sense consciousnesses. There are 4, where the cause of the error exists in the basis, such as an eye impaired by an obscuring disease. Say, for instance, I don't have the Tibetan text right in front of me right here. Generally, when we talk about in the West, what do they call when it appears that something is falling through your vision? What is that called? Stephen, are you thinking?
Yeah, those are called floaters.
Floaters. Okay. So in many of the Madhyamaka texts, they talk about eye impairment or eye disease. Some people even translated the term as cataracts. But generally, the philosophers now say that this is referring to something like floaters. There's an impairment in your sight. What is appearing to you does not necessarily exist. If you have a tremendous amount, you might think that someone is pouring hair into your soup. As you're eating your soup and you see these things floating down, it looks like there's something, oh, I don't want to eat this. There's hairs in this or something like that. That's a cause of error existing in the basis. The basis meaning the sense faculty, okay? Eye impaired by an obscuring disease. For a sense consciousness that sees one moon as 2 is produced in dependence upon that. Also, if you stick a finger in your eye, can you do this? Can you see? I can see 2 lamps right now. I can see 2 Vajrayoginis. That is an example. That's not a direct perceiver. Why is it not a direct perceiver? Because there are not 2 Vajrayoginis sitting in front of me. There are not 2 lamps sitting in front of me. It is a mistaken consciousness. It is an eye consciousness to which an object clearly appears, but it is mistaken. There can be direct perceivers where the cause of error exists in the abode. So the example here, sitting in a boat for a sense consciousness that sees trees as moving is produced in dependence upon that. So, or sitting on a train, or let's say sitting in a plane, looking out the window and seeing it looks like the clouds are swooshing by you. It could be sometimes the clouds are moving. As you know, Einstein theory of relativity is all relative, but generally, if you're just stationary in the air in a blimp or in a balloon, the clouds might seem just sitting there. But if you're in a plane going by that scene, it looks like the clouds are moving. That's said to be a source of error in the abode. Okay, so that's a mistaken eye consciousness. The cause of error existing in the object. Here the example, a quickly whirling firebrand. You know what it's talking about, like the sparkler or something. Have you ever seen that? When you had a piece of wood from the fireplace, say, and someone swirls it around, it looks like a circle of red, right? Sense consciousness that sees a firebrand as a wheel is produced in dependence upon that, and the cause of error existing in the immediately preceding condition. Okay. Say, for instance, remember what the immediately preceding condition is. Remember, there are 3 conditions for a consciousness. The object condition, which is the aspect that's casting itself. The empowering condition, or the faculty, that's a physical matter that the consciousness enters into, and the immediately preceding condition, which is a previous moment of consciousness that gives rise to that. So here it says, the fourth, the cause of error existing in the immediately preceding condition is, for example, a mind disturbed by hatred. So hatred is in the I consciousness? No, why not? Everyone, most people nodded. Doris, are you listening? Okay, I thought you were false. So is hatred is your I consciousness have hatred in it? Okay.
Hatred is a mental factor.
Hatred is a mental factor. What I consciousness has mental factors. That's not sufficient. Hatred is a delusion, a klesha. You only have klesha in the mental continuum. There's difference. I consciousness does have mental factors. Okay. So if your mind is angry and sufficiently angry, for a sense consciousness that sees earth as red is produced in dependence upon that. So because of the maybe the high blood pressure because of your anger, that affects your eye. Well, here it says it's a immediately preceding condition, so it doesn't mean necessarily the blood pressure, but because of the anger in your mind acting as the immediately preceding condition for looking at something. Non-conceptual wrong consciousness. So this gets back to Bob's question before. Here is non-conceptual, that would mean generally perceptual. Non-conceptual wrong consciousnesses. There's a lot, when you see things wrongly, hear things wrongly, and so forth. Non-conceptual wrong consciousness, non-conceptual facsimile of direct perceiver, and a consciousness that has a clear appearance of a non-existent are synonymous. So you can toss those around, those three in your mind, and see if they sound a little bit different. Then you check they're actually synonymous. Bob.
Yeah, this third one sounds exactly what Stephen was talking about. Because if I ask myself, what is a consciousness that has a clear, well, of course, there's also the firebrand and stuff, but that could also be a dream consciousness too. Because as you were saying, a dream consciousness has a clear appearance, but it's like what you're dreaming about is a non-existent.
Right. So when if you take those three synonyms, even though you might think that a synonym is not going to give you much more information about something, just the way that it appears to your mind when you think about them, they can bring up some other kinds of connections. Okay, so that's a useful exercise. So now we get to some nitty-gritty here. Inferential valid cognizers. So an inferential cognizer in general is something that has arisen because of mental activity. It's conceptual. It's in your mind. Doesn't arise in your sense consciousnesses. It is thinking about thinking about a logical reasoning. It has apprehended the signs that the subject is in the sign, that the sign pervades the predicate and so forth. And you've come to realize sound isn't permanent because it's a product. That first instant is an inferential cognizer. So here, the definition of an inferential valid cognizer is a new, incontrovertible, determinative knower. Did we hear this? Do you remember this word before? Determinative knower? Nadine says she doesn't remember that. Well, she didn't say, but I'm judging by her face going like this. Who remembers what a determinative knower is? Yarpel, do you? Oh, wait, Doris, I'll ask Yarpel first.
Conceptual.
it's a conceptual mind, right?
Yes.
It's determined. we talk about it. It's determined object with respect to conception only. We don't talk about determined object with respect to perceptions. So a determinative knower is a conceptual mind. Is that more or less what you're going to say, Doris? Okay.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, okay. A new, incontrovertible, determinative knower. So it's a conceptual mind that is incontrovertible, that is directly produced or produced directly in dependence upon a correct sign that is its basis. So when we talked about these three elements, the subject, the predicate, and the sign or mark, here it's not talking about the mark, the sign. We talk about the whole reason as being a correct sign. You know, sound is impermanent because it's a product, can be called a correct sign. There's some element missing here of the example, but we'll get into that later. Sound is impermanent because it's a product. So that is produced directly or directly produced in dependence upon a correct sign that is its basis. So that's the basis for having this particular kind of state of mind called a inferential valid cognizer. When inferential valid cognizers are divided, there are three. Inferential valid cognizers by the power of the facts, inferential cognizers through renown, and inferential cognizers through belief. So you might think that doesn't sound like, you know, just because you believe something, that's not what it means. Inferential cognizer through the power of the fact is one that is dependent on a reasoning, like sound is impermanent because it's a product. Inferential cognizers through renown is a variation of that. It's still by the power of the fact, but it's an inferential cognizer that thinks that this is suitable to be called mug, jug, yeti, thermos, jar. Anything can be called anything else. That's what's called an inferential cognizer through renown, that phenomena do not adhere, names do not adhere into phenomena naturally. They are adventitious, they are given by renown, right?
Oh.
Because they're famous. Oh, this is a Sharpie. Actually, this is a Sharpie, but even if it wasn't a Sharpie or Kleenex, you have tissue, you might say, oh, that's Kleenex, but that's just by renown. That's not everyone calls that Kleenex, right? Someone has their own generic name for it. The third, inferential cognizers through belief, are inferential cognizers that can realize deeply hidden phenomena. Generally, remember we talked about three kinds of phenomena: manifest, hidden, and deeply hidden, right? You could call it slightly hidden and deeply hidden. So manifest phenomena, you don't need to have inferential cognizers in general, although in some circumstances you can infer that there's fire behind that wall over there because there's billowing smoke coming up. Generally, fire is something that you can perceive with direct perception. You don't need an inference. But in some circumstances, when you're obscured, you can use inference to prove that. Hidden phenomena cannot be perceived from the beginning without depending upon some inference, some syllogism, some correct sign. Example of hidden phenomena: subtle impermanence, selflessness of persons, and from higher tenets, selflessness of phenomena. They're not phenomena that can be perceived from the very beginning without depending on a sign. Otherwise, we'd all be liberated, right? If you could perceive, from the very beginning that the self did not exist the way that it appears, or that phenomena were empty of inherent existence, you wouldn't need to have all of these textbooks written to explain about, selflessness and so forth. Selflessness is said to be a hidden phenomena because it cannot be perceived from the beginning without depending on a correct sign. How about the other side of the moon? Is that a manifest phenomena? One face of the moon always shines toward Earth, right? Did you know that? It's not like it's rotating. I mean, it is rotating, but it's synced up with so the one face is always, so the dark side of the moon, some people wondered whether it actually existed or what was there. Is that a hidden phenomena?
Not to the Chinese.
Not for the Chinese?
No.
They sent something to the dark side of the moon. So first of all, it's a manifest phenomena, so it doesn't need to be doesn't require a logical reasoning to prove its existence. But for us on Earth, who never saw the other side, maybe we needed some kind of reasoning. And here, the reasoning wouldn't be sending a probe there, because that would be direct perception. But that the moon is spherical, there must be another side to it or something that you can infer the existence. But in general, you don't need to have a reasoning to infer that. So here, inferential cognizers through belief. The third kind of phenomena is called deeply hidden phenomena. Phenomena that cannot be perceived by ordinary beings with direct perception, nor through inferential cognizer by the power of the fact. Just an ordinary inference. For instance, when the Buddha gave, when someone gave to the Buddha, some beggar, some very poor people in the past gave a loaf of bread to the Buddha. They were very poor, and the Buddha prophesied, in the future, you will be born as the Pratikya Buddha named so-and-so, I can't remember which name, in a world system, in so many eons in the future, and this and so forth. Now, in general, you can understand that giving, the act of charity, has a karmic effect of receiving resources in the future. The karmic effect of that, the fruit of giving is actually receiving. But to know the particular way that you're giving will manifest in the future on your own continuum is said to be a deeply hidden phenomenon, right? You've heard this before, right? So that is an example. How can you know that that beggar or that poor person's gift, their act of charity, would arise with them becoming a Pratika Buddha in the future named so-and-so? So how would you know that? Through your belief in the statement of the Buddha as a pramana, as a valid person. Here pramana doesn't always mean cognition. Pramana just means just valid or prime, the best. So if you have ascertained that the Buddha is a valid person, then their pronouncements can be, through your belief in that, their pronouncements can lead you to understand deeply hidden phenomena, such as the fact that the karma would ripen in that particular way. Make sense? Stephen, you look a little bit skeptical. I'm not sure. You're looking off to the side like,
Well, Thank you, Venerable George. I was just trying to recall something you taught us in the tenets course, which was the fourfold analysis. And I was wondering if that applied in this case. And I think it has to do with the reputation of the person, whether the statement contradicts other accepted dharma, for example, whether it's internally consistent and so on. I'm not sure I've got it right. That's why I was looking confused.
Right. I'm not sure there are four, but anyway, so one might think fourfold analysis when we talked about the meditation on emptiness, establishing the object of negation and the pervasion and the counter and the the pervasion, and then those two other factors. Here we're talking about a scripture that has been purified by seeing that there are no internal inconsistencies. It is not inconsistent with the teachings of the Buddha and so forth. But Christine, you have a question.
Yes. Is all karma deeply hidden phenomena?
No.
Okay.
It said, even though it's the example here, let me give you an example here. An illustration of the third, inferential cognizer through belief. Illustration. An inferential cognizer that realizes that the scriptural citation, a scriptural statement of the Buddha, from giving come resources. The word come doesn't, it just says from giving resources. So the implication is that you get resources through giving. From ethics, happy migration, and there are others, through patience, a beautiful form, through, of the other perfections. So that is an illustration is an inferential cognizer that realizes the scripture from giving resources, from ethics, a happy migration, is incontrovertible with respect to the meaning indicated by it, by the sign of it being a scripture free from the three contradictions. That's what Stephen was talking about. And we're not three contradictions. So actually, it's said in the scriptures, in the commentaries, that to realize giving of charity will result in having resources in the future is not a deeply hidden phenomena. But what is deeply hidden is the particular way that the resources will be obtained, at what time, in what form. That's what's deeply hidden. Ethics will, the fact that ethics give rise to happy migrations, we know that from karma. Karma is definite, right? But the particular way, the particular world in which you will be reborn by practicing ethics, in what universe, at what time, and so forth, all the specifics, that is a deeply hidden phenomena that even the 10th level bodhisattvas can't perceive. There are other deeply hidden phenomena, the qualities of the Buddha, the uncommon qualities that only the Buddha knows. Even the 10th level bodhisattvas don't know all of the Buddha qualities. They can't know what's happening in the Buddha's mind because the Buddha's mind is on a level higher than them. Even with clairvoyance, if they were to try to see the Buddha's mind, they can't see all the qualities. Those are called deeply hidden phenomena also. Okay? So just to finish this whole section, an inferential valid cognizer is a new, incontrovertible, determinative knower that is directly produced or produced directly in dependence upon a correct sign that is its basis. Directly, because the next moment is not that after you've directly produced a inferential cognizer in dependence on a sign, the next moment, the continuity of that, the subsequent cognizer, is still a valid cognizer, but it is not called an inferential valid cognizer any longer, because it is not directly produced upon the sign. The sign being kind of like the equivalent here of the of the eye consciousness seeing some color or shape by its own power. The second moment is sort of pulled along by that. Remember when we talked about direct perceivers? So we say there are three kinds: inferential cognizers by the power of the fact, through renown and through belief. Inferential cognizer by the power of the fact, illustration. Inferential cognizer that realizes sound is impermanent through the sign of being a product. So that means that first moment on the independence upon having established the sign that the subject is in the sign, the property of the subject, that the pervasion and independence upon that, sitting and letting that sort of, yeah, like when I make stew, it takes a long time for everything to come together, right? You're making chili. When all of that melds together, that first instant of realization that's incontrovertible is a inferential cognizer that realizes sound is impermanent through the sign of being a product. Illustration of the second, through inferential cognizer through renown. An inferential cognizer that realizes it is suitable to express the rabbit possessor by the term moon from the sign of it existing among objects of thought. Yarpol, have you heard of that before?
I'm not sure.
That's good. Honest answer. Nadine, have you heard of that before? Rabbit possessor? What's the rabbit possessor? Rebone Chen in Tibetan. I don't know what it is in Sanskrit. It's another name for the moon in Sanskrit, in Indian language, right? Because at their latitude, instead of seeing the man in the moon, it looks like there's a rabbit. Depends on what looks most apparent, depending on the declination of the moon and so forth. Different people see different things in the moon. So that's a name that was given to the moon, rabbit possessor. So when it says an inferential cognizer that realizes it is suitable to express the rabbit possessor, that means that object up in the sky, by the term moon. It's okay to call that moon because it exists among objects of thought. That means anything that exists as an object of thought can be called anything. Okay. The third illustration of an inferential cognizer through belief is, we just gave that example about giving from giving resources and so forth. An inferential cognizer through renown is necessarily an inferential cognizer by the power of the fact. I'd mentioned it before. Also, whatever is a direct perceiver is not necessarily a direct valid cognizer. It seems like a non sequitur here. You'll see in a moment. Whatever is a direct perceiver is not necessarily a direct valid cognizer. Oh, was that Stephen? Why is that? Well, the second moment is a subsequent cognizer, right? It's not valid any longer, according to Sautrantika. And so that follows because that the second moment of a sense direct perceiver apprehending a form and the second moment of an inferential cognizer that realizes that sound is impermanent are subsequent cognizers. So the second moment, or the moment after a direct cognizer, a inferential cognizer, says the second moment of an inferential cognizer that realizes sound is impermanent are subsequent cognizers. Some would say that the second moment is no longer an inferential cognizer because it doesn't directly depend upon the sign. I mean, we can go into that detail later. This is because of one Buddhist scholar called Dharmottara. He had a text called Correct or the correct. It says the two, the first moment of a direct perceiver and the first moment of an inferential cognizers are valid cognizers. But subsequent moments in the continuums of those, because of being non-different in establishment and abiding, have forsaken being valid cognizers. Okay. Enough for today, right? How are you doing? Intellectual diarrhea, constipation? I don't have my
Overload.
Pepto-Bismol. I have some
Intellectual overload.
generic. Go on, say.
Intellectual overload.
Overload, okay. So the only way to, or one way to overcome this indigestion, intellectual indigestion, is to let it digest, think about it again. In discussion group, ask questions, clarify. Other people asking questions from a different point of view than your own cause your mind to look at the situation from a different direction, which is the aim of analytical meditation that you yourself should be able to do. But because our minds are not that agile yet, we don't have vipassana that can remain, quiet and analyze. So debate and discussion is very good. And reading the various texts. I received a gift from Shanka and his wife. Shanka, remember your wife's name? I got it wrong before.
Deirdre.
Deirdre. I said Deborah or something like that, or Rachel or something. So this book by Yeshe Tarchin, a huge text, the Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, what's it called? Mind and Its Function, Compendium of Ways of Knowing, other texts that you may have access to reading, and you should not need any other kind of Pepto-Bismol or anything other than that. So, any last question before we finish? Rowena, I didn't hear from you today. Christine, yeah.
How can we support you in your healing?
Oh, you can imagine all sentient beings that are getting old. As Lama Yeshe told me once, when I noticed some cataracts on his eye, he looked at me with big eyes and said, "The Lord of Death is taking back his equipment."
Oh no.
So everyone is experiencing their own organ recitals. So just to have a sense of recognition, this is where we're all going, and to feel compassion, to send out love, and that is the best thing.
Is there a mantra we can say that would help?
Oh, I think
You in mind?
Om Mani Padme Hum is the mantra of the Buddha of compassion. The Dalai Lama says it is more worthwhile than most other mantras. Some circumstances, of course, there's different mantras that have effectiveness, but to one moment of compassion for sentient beings and dedicating whatever energy to the healing so that people are so their life, if they have lives of perfect human rebirth, lives of leisure and endowment, that they are not cut short because of other karma. We have a certain throwing karma that throws us into a lifetime that we might have a certain expected, not something that we can ascertain, certain lifespan, but that can be cut short because other karma that we've created at other times, can cause us to have an accident or have health problems or something like that. So just to dedicate that to the alleviation of shortened lifespans for all sentient beings. So I didn't leave time at the beginning again for a prayer, but let's have the dedication prayer. Whoever is the host up here. Here we go. Wow. Okay, there we go. Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sange Drugyurne Oa Chikya Malupa Dei Sala Kupasho Chanchuk Semchuk Rinpoche Akipan Egyurchi Epanyama Epaya Gome Gongdu Elpasho. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading doctrine. The master accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Savior of myself and others, dear disciples, please live long. Wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness, incomparably kind and compassionate. May your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places of spiritual west, mindful of your love and discernment, and intentionally descending again to a family of far distant land, this request, O Lama, please live long. And to Geshe Cherub, so we missed Geshe Cherub's.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeshe Cherub is back in Santa Fe now, I guess you
Right.
know.
I saw the photo of the double. So to think Geshe-la, who has served the center with this incredible exacting precision in leading the students to deeper understanding of the stages of the path, to this incomparable teacher, to make requests, please live long. Beloved teacher, leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You who are the unequaled guide, please live a long and stable life. So thank you for your patience in chewing these tough bones. Try to get over your indigestion and see you again next week, okay?